Hey Star Trek fans, Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season continues with the latest episode, Season 5, Episode 7, Erigah. As always, my review and deep dive will contain spoilers, so consider yourself warned. After last week's discovery of the latest clue thanks to a Prime Directive-bending adventure, this week takes a break from treasure hunting to catch up with our old pals, Mal and Locke. The USS Lockerer has tracked them down and Starfleet wants Discovery on the scene. Locke, who had been grievously injured in the episode Mirrors, is beamed to Discovery's sickbay along with Mal under Federation custody. This prisoner transfer gives us a chance to see Commander Nhan again, whom you might recall is now working for Starfleet security. We last saw her in Season 4 shepherding Captain Burnham as she tracked down Book, who had gone rogue. This gives her appearance here an interesting dynamic, as she is still wary of Book due to his past transgressions. I definitely enjoyed seeing Rachel Ancherl back as Nhan, and she is given some interesting things to do in this episode, including an eventual truce between her and Book. We know from a couple of episodes ago that Locke is one of the Breen Primarch's nephews, but in this episode we discover that he is in fact a direct descendant of the Emperor, and the Primarchs who are battling for control of the Breen Imperium need him in order to solidify their various claims. And now the Breen Primarch Rune, whom we met in the flashbacks in the episode Mirrors, is on his way with a Breen dreadnought to take custody of Locke and Mal. I've definitely enjoyed Discovery's use of the Breen so far this season. As a mostly mysterious antagonist over the years, there's a lot of room to flesh them out. Some mention is made in this episode of how differently the Breen think from humans, and we certainly see that is the case, although I do think there's even more room to make them completely alien from most of the humanoid species we've met. They inspire a great deal of fear in the Starfleeters, being faceless and, to this point, fairly implacable foes. Several references are made to the last time the Breen invaded Federation space and the destruction they left in their wake. More on that in the references section later in the video. I also enjoyed Raynor's part in this episode. As a Kelleran, he is very familiar with the Breen, his homeworld having been occupied and used as an outpost by the Breen in the past. His reticence to talk on the subject early in the episode is a bit frustrating, but his knowledge is put to good use later on in a gambit by Burnham, Tarina, and Vance to bluff the Breen. Speaking of Tarina, I'm going to get to my first real issue with this episode, and it's one that's been building for the last few episodes. I'm really starting to feel the absence of Doug Jones as Saru. It's annoying enough that he hasn't been here in the last 3 episodes, but now in the 4th episode to not feature him, we get Tarina and no Saru. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Tarina, and I think she's a great character in her own right. That is definitely not in question here. I'm very happy to see Tarina for sure. But to have her here and to have her throw off a line about how Saru is away doing negotiations, but he passed along this bit of intel, that frankly feels a little insulting at this point. Now, I recently did an episode of This Week in Trek in which I talked about why Doug Jones is missing for much of the season. He was off promoting his role in Hocus Pocus 2 for the record. I get that he couldn't be there, but this is another in a growing list of frustrations that must have come from them not knowing that this would be the final season of Discovery. Part of me thinks that if they had known, they might have done a better job of ensuring that Saru had a bigger role in the season. This is among our last chances to see the character after all. Add to that the notable absence of other Discovery familiar faces, Owoshikun and Detmer for instance. I truly wonder what the story is behind their disappearance this season. Well, getting back to the things I liked about this episode, the subplot with Adira and Tilly engaging the services of former bookmonger Jet Reno in their attempt to learn the provenance of the most recent clue was a lot of fun. The more Tig Notaro, the better, and I loved the insights into her past before Starfleet. I'm looking forward to seeing her bartending skills in action too. Getting back to the story, we have an escape attempt by Locke and Mal that takes a tragic turn. First of all, whose idea was it to put that much medication inside the containment field with Locke? Second, I have to say, I truly was not expecting the show to kill off Locke at this point. That definitely took me by surprise. One more quick criticism, however. That fight scene between Mal and Nhan, I don't know what was up with the editing and camera movement during that, but please don't ever do that again. I did not like it, and it was very visually confusing. I'm not sure exactly what they were trying to accomplish with that, but I really didn't feel it worked. And I'm curious your thoughts. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on that kind of strange camera movement and editing during that scene. I don't know. Maybe it worked for some people, but it seemed very odd. In the end, Maul goes with the Breen, revealing that she is married to Locke, and possibly with plans to use the progenitor's tech to bring him back to life. It looks like the Breen will continue to be the big bad for the season, and I honestly don't know how everything is going to play out with Maul. I'm certainly curious to see where the story goes from here. Finally, a kudos for the visuals in this episode, outside of that fight scene, that is. The massive Breen dreadnought looming over Federation headquarters, half in and half out of the nebula, looked frankly amazing. And then at the end, when it finally warps away, leaving the Starfleet ship slightly kind of unmoored in its wake, beautiful. Although, with that said, I'm not sure how much scientific sense that makes, but still, it looked really cool. Last week was a little light on the Easter eggs and references, but this episode certainly makes up for it. First, of course, we have the return of Nan, who left Discovery in Season 3. Season 4 showed that she had joined Starfleet Security, and she's here in that capacity once again, along with some bad blood between her and Book. They both make reference to that episode in which Discovery and Book's ship exchanged weapons fire. In attempting to care for Locke, Culber mentions that he's been reading Dominion War-era medical research, referring to the conflict depicted in the final seasons of Deep Space Nine, the end of which featured the Breen joining the war on the side of the Dominion. We also learn that a Breen refrigeration unit will help Locke, which jibes with the references to Breen uniforms as refrigeration suits in DS9. President Rillick is said to be away at a diplomatic summit on Tellar Prime. Tellar Prime is the homeworld of the Tellarites, one of the original founding members of the United Federation of Planets. They were first seen in the TOS episode, Journey to Babel. Mention is made a couple of times about the last time the Breen entered Federation space. Tilly says that the last time this happened, they destroyed a whole city. I have to think that this is a reference to the Breen attack on Earth in the Deep Space Nine episode The Changing Face of Evil, in which they deal significant damage to Starfleet headquarters and the city of San Francisco. Rayner suggests using Thoron emitters and Duranium shadows to fool the Breen into thinking Starfleet headquarters is more heavily armed than they actually are. This trick was first used by the crew of Deep Space Nine in their premiere episode, Emissary, to fool the Cardassians. In the Season 4 premiere, The Way of the Warrior, the Klingons suspect that they have done the same trick again as they prepare to attack Deep Space Nine. However, as Sisko says in that episode, it's no illusion. Rayner also mentions the Romulans saying, "Never turn your back on a Breen." This comes from the Deep Space Nine episode By Inferno's Light, just after a Breen prisoner takes a Jem'Hadar guard's phaser and kills him. According to Stamets, Discovery's backup for the Progenitor mission is the USS Mitchell. The Mitchell was seen in a couple of episodes of Season 4 and was named in honor of Kenneth Mitchell, the actor who played several roles in Discovery's first 3 seasons and who sadly passed away due to ALS in February of this year. In talking about her experience as a bartender, Reno says that she is famous for a drink called 7 of Limes. I'm assuming 2 things with this. First, that it is named for the character 7 of 9 played by Jerry Ryan in Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Picard. And second, that it's a drink that she came up with, or learned of, after Discovery contacted Starfleet in the 32nd century. That's the only way this makes sense timeline-wise. Tarina opts to blame bureaucracy for a delay in transferring the prisoners to the Breen, rather than claiming a tribble infestation. I think she made the right choice. References made in this episode to the planet Bopak 3. This world featured in the Deep Space Nine episode Hippocratic Oath, in which Bashir and O'Brien crash a runabout and encounter a group of Jem'Hadar attempting to free themselves from the addiction to Ketracel White, the drug used by the founders of the Dominion to keep them in thrall. The drug that Locke overdoses on is tricordrazine, a drug that was first mentioned in Star Trek The Next Generation. It is presumably a further development of the drug cordrazine from the original series, which notably caused McCoy's psychosis in the classic episode The City on the Edge of Forever. And finally, we learn the location of what is presumably the final clue to the Progenitor's technology. It lies in an area of space called the Badlands, which featured heavily in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, mostly as a hideout for the renegade Maquis. It is also notably where the USS Voyager was taken from and thrown into the Delta Quadrant. Well, there we go. That's 7 episodes down, only 3 remaining in the season and in the entire series. So what did you think of Erigah? Let me know in the comments, and let me know if I missed any references that you caught. Thank you so much to the Patreon supporters. If you'd like to help out the show, please go to patreon.com/Kertrats. Hit like if you like this video, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and subscribe if you haven't already. I've been Dan Gunther. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, as always, live long and prosper.